So we are back to art and beauty. Art and beauty, beauty transpires through art. And I would like to offer to you the metaphor that I love to use at all of my open art sessions, and those who attend those sessions know that. So my metaphor is the following. When a big orchestra is about to start playing its beautiful music, the violin principal tunes the orchestra up. So the orchestra and the listeners' arts can dive deep into the beauty of music. So the art and the general beauty that transpires through art, it turns up our minds and hearts and souls. It nourishes our senses and intellect so we can appreciate the better and fuller and more enjoyable all the beauty around us, the thing that we call, and I love to repeat it again, the beauty as our environments. We are going to look into the artwork of one of the most recognizable artists of the end of 19th and the beginning of 20th century, the stardom of brilliance of the golden boy of painting, John Singer Sargent. John Singer Sargent was born in Italy, in Florence, believe it or not, into the family of American parents, though. So he lived and studied art, was trained in Florence, Rome, Paris. Then he traveled around the Europe, was in Spain, where he was enjoyed and introduced and had been influenced by Velázquez. And then Netherlands, Franz Hals, and of course he was very inspired by impressionism. When he finished more or less his training, he moved to Paris as it was supposed to be in those times, and he started painting there, painting, exhibiting, showing his art. And before we, as that orchestra that I mentioned, dive into the ocean of his art, what I want us to do, I want us to slowly move through the virtual museum that I've put together for today's presentation. Because, when we are coming to the museum, to the gallery, to any more or less big show, and this is a big show, what we do first, we walk slowly around and observe the platitude that we are going to look in more details, enjoy or reject, or whatever will happen, we'll see. Though I hope that we are going to enjoy John Singer Sargent artwork. So this is the first slide. This is the first row of our presentation. John Singer Sargent very successfully started his artistic career with his mastership, with huge craft that he professed, and everything beyond imagination for a young artist, who he was when, as you can see it, when in 1884, he decided to show one of his masterworks at the art salon in Paris. What he did, he's chosen as his model that beautiful lady, known in Paris in society. She was a society lady, as a very artful lady with somewhat special air about her, and you can feel it when you look at her portrait. Her name was Virginia by her birth because she was born in Louisiana in America. She was just married into the France, I believe, and her name was Madame Pierre Gautreau. So Madame Pierre Gautreau was a very beautiful lady. She decided to just sit as it is called in art, to be John's Sargent sitter. It was not a commission. She was just posing. And Sargent decided to present her portrait because through that work, he just wanted to enhance his reputation, his standing, etc. You know, you understand it. And what happens? What happens? That is called minor scandal. What John Sargent did, look at this right shoulder of her. In the original state of the portrait, Sargent allowed this right strap of her dress slipped down just a little bit, just here. And there was a shock for all the viewers, for all the critics, for all the everything. So John Sargent eventually painted back the strap, took that portrait to his studio, where he kept that portrait for 30 years. I'm going to finalize the story of Madame Gautreau at the very end of our presentation, and you will understand why. Meanwhile, let us get a little bit back and see what John Sargent started to create. Because in 1886, he moved to London. Eventually, he became a London citizen, and he was traveler. He was hugely traveling around the world, around the Europe and everything, but he was London citizen, though he was connected very strongly with New England. And if to pick up the home place in New England for John Sargent, it was Boston. Of course, it was Boston. So John Sargent very fast became the most known and beloved portrait painter. And no doubt that we see all the reasons for that. Look at these beautiful portraits. Look at them all. Not that these ladies are very beautiful, they also are beautifully presented. Look at their beautiful faces. Look at their beautiful dresses. That's why it is said that John Sargent not only possessed what was called in one of the very respected source about art, exhilarating brushwork. It is how they call it, and it's indeed the exhilarating brushwork. But also, John Sargent showed a perfect sense of style, and somewhat that we can call, I would like to call it the elegant artistry, because you can, of course, be very well achieved in the craft of painting, but the elegance of it, that is probably the other side of John Sargent's talent. We will get back a little bit later to this portrait. See, this one. It is presented together with the photograph of the same person. I would like to get back to this portrait a little bit later, because I want us to see another very popular and very loved feature or side of John Sargent painting, which is called, that trend is called conversation pieces, believe it or not. Well, it is contemporary term, but it is applied, it started to be applied in 18th century. And what it means that artist presents the group of family or the group of friends or whatever group in the fine composition. That one, for example, very well known and very much beloved conversation pieces, which is called Daughters of Edward Darley Boyd. And it is owned by Museum of Fine Arts. I purposely decided to include in our presentation that photograph because it presents how it is shown at MFA room. And interesting thing about this presentation that you see on the sides of the painting, there are two Chinese vases, which are of the same or very similar to those which are depicted in John Sargent painting. Another very famous piece is this one. It is called Carnation Lily Lily Rose. I think I have seen that reproduction so many times in so many different books and settings and posters and everything. It is, by the way, is owned by London's Gallery Tate. That maybe it should be called, it should be considered as the most uh, famous, as the most famous painting by John Sargent. I wanted to point on that little painting. See, this is not a conversation piece. This is not a rich and glamorous and stylish lady. This is just a baby. Why I wanted to show it to you? Because that one shows that exactly thing that Yale Dictionary of Art and Artists that I quoted before, which is called, which this source calls exhilarating brushwork. Indeed, indeed. All right, let's see what else we have. We have here at the same page one of my personally favorite piece with a flamenco dancer that you can find at Isabella Stewart Museum. I find that not just plainly beautiful because it is beautiful and you see the beauty of painting, the beauty of movement, the beauty of color, the beauty of everything, but also, by the way, look what a difficult posture, what a difficult body position John Sargent is easily managing to present. Trust me, as a professional, I am just in awe when I see that figure presented in that perfect way. And also what I included here um, the etude, I believe, for similar painting, another dancer and another flamenco dancer. Also, just for fun of it, I wanted you to see the etudes. I call them, maybe they are not etudes, maybe they're just unfinished paintings, but they shown, for example, this perfectly shown how the artist works, how his brush strokes start from the underlayer to the other layer, to the details, to the subtle color of so much of beauty in painting white. You know what we artists appreciate very much? We appreciate very much when somebody in this field can paint white, because white is not just plain white. It is so many shades of white, so many color in it, so much of enjoyment. while you're looking at it. What it gives to us, and I hope you can share my feeling. What it gives to us, the thing that I would like to name visual happiness. Visual happiness, not a bad thing, and this portrait as well. It shows the seemingly easy approach, but what is behind that easy approach and easy presentation? Not only years of experience and the depth of training, which is there, but also the talent. Of course, without that, nothing happens in art, in everything. Everything should be supported by art, by talent. All right, there are a few more things. That is just plainly beautiful piece. I would not be surprised if at some contemporary show I would see that painting because it presents that air of today with application of color, with interaction of shapes and colors, and melting one color into another. And this is just oil painting. You just wait what we're gonna do in other facets of John Sargent art. Just portrait, not only ladies are portrayed there, another portrait. And at the end of that part of display, I just thought that we would have to look at the flowers. We all love flowers. Some of us, some of you, those who listen to my talk, prefer flowers to anything else as a topic of your own art and see their perfection, simplicity, exhilarating brushwork, sharp sense of style, and elegant artistry plus talent. All right, what we are going to do next. Let me see what we have. I made that collection of John Sargent portraits. Some of them self-portraits. For example, this is young man John Singer Sargent as he was looking when he was young, when he was in Paris, or when he just moved to London. So it is about 30 years old. And another one, also very young. This is he in his adult, more adult, not older age, but somewhat mature age, I would say. It is a painting, and this is the drawing. John Singer Sargent was an excellent drawer, drafter. The graphite, the chalk was following the command of his mind and hand, just 100% or 200%, whatever you prefer to call it. Just for fun of it, I wanted you to see how it was looking when John Sargent was painting plein air and how it was looking in his studio with the portrait of Madame Gautier sitting in the corner of his studio for, again, I want to repeat it, for 30 years. All right, let's go further. Yes. Watercolor of John Singer Sargent. That is that one special facet of his body of work that I have to make the confession that I am most fascinated. Not that I am not appreciative of his oil paintings. I'm not insane. I admire them, of course, from whatever angle you're looking at. Oils, they're as close to perfect as they possibly can. But look at these watercolors. not by accident, I've chosen this one that I'm just circling with my arrow. It is very simple, and it is called Light and Shadows. Light and Shadows. That is one of the most popular images of pictures that John Sargent has created. And when I was thinking about what I would try to describe to you, inviting you to look at this particular painting, to starting exploring the watercolor collection of John Sargent paintings. I imagine that situation. You just pick up any artist from the face of the earth, anyone. You put it in front of that painting, Light and Shadows, and just wait for reaction. And the reaction will be the same. Something like that. The heavens are bringing highest of joy to my heart when I look at this painting. The beauty of it is not just the beauty. It is something divine in that simple combination of shadows and light, in that simple composition, which everything is perfect. It looks like it is accidentally picked up, but it is not. And when we finish looking at watercolors, I would come back to this particular painting because the simplicity of it, the simplicity is sacred, and this is one of the examples of it. Next painting that I've chosen to this watercolor display is the jokingly presented painter paintings who is painting plein air. I can easily imagine that John Sargent decided that it could be himself or it could be somebody else painting outside, doing the plein air. There are a few more presentations of plein air. Plus, for example, you see that image. Artist is painting the mountains. And not only the painter, John Sargent, presented somebody who is painting, which is good, but also landscape is here. And landscape is quite beautiful. John Sargent is known for his capability to enter into landscape a human figure in the natural and perfect way. Another example, by the way, talking about light and shadows, can you see? You cannot ever see in John Sargent paintings, at least in watercolor, the shadow as a gray or as a dark or as a boring color combination or just color. It is always rich. Look at this shadow. The whole lot of artistry just in this little thing. And that painting that presents just the clothes, putting out on the clothes strings just to dry. And so we are all for equality. This is the lady painter. Lady painter is painting plein air with umbrella and her little etude box and everything, and somebody is watching. So we all are here. Let's see what's next. And what is next? You just look at this one. Who do you think John Singer Sargent decided to paint here? Monet. It is called Monet is painting. It is how it was looking when Claude Monet was painting his plein airs. We don't know where it was. Maybe it is in his famous garden, maybe somewhere else, But the fun of that particular painting by John Sargent is that not only there is the beauty as usual, because, you know, there are some art that when you call it beautiful, it sounds like almost insult. Of course it is beautiful because it is this painting of that painter, but it is also fun. Look what he did with the head of the painter. Look at his little feet. Look at the whole position. It is not a caricature, but it is a little bit of humor in that presentation. And by the way, John Sargent didn't forget to show you the palette that a painter Monet is holding. It is filled with color, not just something. It is a painter. All right. It is known that John Sargent loved to travel, and well, after all, he was born in Italy and travel around Italy a lot. So it's not surprising that we have a lot of landscapes, of Venice landscapes and other landscapes with water and everything. Let me move that a little bit. Yeah, so you can see that painting with the bridge. Oh well, let's take a little look at these paintings with water, all 5 of them. And Monet is watching. Monet is watching how we show the appreciation of the paintings created by other painter, John Sargent. Look at this water. You know how difficult it is to paint water and how beautifully it is painted here. And not only the water with reflections of buildings, see? But if you can carefully look at the bridge and at the building, especially in this painting, you can see, look at this line. You will see that not only buildings are getting reflected in water, water sends the reflection of the reflected light from the sky onto the buildings. It is how it works. Everything is connected. Water gets reflection from the sky. It reflects that light onto the buildings, and buildings are getting reflected into water, and the circle is going in circles and circles and circles. This one is also very beautiful. It presents the darker time of the day. Let me move that box a little bit, so because I wanted to show you something else there. Yeah. I want us just to calmly look into that painting, which presents something under the bridge. The water, of course, part of the boat, and some construction details. Why I wanted to include that particular painting, and a few more, you will see it later, in our collection, in the collection of our virtual museum of art of John Sargent, because it shows not only the wide brush strokes, but also the details that, especially in contrast with the width of the almost pouring color onto the paper. In contrast with that, the line and the sharp shadow enhances the lightness of the light, if you will forgive me for that lightness of the light saying. Let's see what else is there. Yeah. This one I have here because that painting presents, first, of course, the shadows and the light. And this is if the shadows and the light would somehow be concentrate in itself, materialize almost without objects. That would be very close to this painting, because everything that we just talked about, the reflection of everything to everything, sky into the water, water into the object, object into the water. And I would be surprised if at some point I would see the reflection of the object through the water onto the sky. Why not? Everything is connected. And this one is plainly beautiful without much of details, but the bigger objects, bigger surfaces are contrasting with each other. The way that we see and we feel and we understand the drama of this time of the day, maybe, or maybe it is before the storm, or maybe something else, but we feel it. Let me move myself again a little bit so you can see better the next painting. The next painting is the cityscape. The cityscape with the boat, Venice, of course. And those of us who was traveling there and who had the chance to experience that themselves, they would almost feel the smell of the water touching your boat, and the sense of that day and the shadow. Maybe it is a hot day, judging by the light on that part of the bridge between buildings. It's very possibly can be hot, and it's very cool in the shadow of those buildings. Another interesting architectural presentation, because Sargent, of course, was capable of everything, including the architectural details, architectural landscapes, cityscapes. When a couple of years ago, we had the show of John Singer Sargent of watercolors in the Museum of Fine Arts. There were many of the paintings of that kind. And of course, I enjoyed it thoroughly. Now, these ones, these three paintings, also watercolors. It's another time of the day. The sun is different. The light is different. Look at the sky. It is not a blue sky. It is something else, another weather, another condition of the air. And by the way, I've chosen especially these two because artist here enjoys himself painting white or off-white. Can you see how many shades of white can artists derive from the buildings of white walls, from the almost white sky, and almost, not white, but almost white shadows, as well as this one. This one I put here because, you know, sometimes when artists who use watercolor as medium, and again, I want to bring to your attention your own experience, those who paint themselves, and especially those who participated in our open art sessions, because at our open art sessions, we have as major medium is watercolor. It is one of the reasons that I put together the huge collection of John Sargent watercolors. So when we paint watercolor, when we use watercolor, sometimes we enjoy when the paint runs into each other when we paint on wet surface. This is one of the examples of the beauty that it presents to us. What else? Yeah. Let me move myself again a little bit on the side. We'll get back to it. I was thinking, should I put it in our museum, virtual museum of watercolors of John Sargent? And I decided to take it. Well, it is fragmented presentation of a fragment, but the relatively unusual for John Sargent, because he's more or less subtle in his watercolor palette. See the very strong contrast between that deep blue, that deep blue shadow and bright, almost inflamed by the light of the sun, the top of it. I just thought that we all would enjoy. After all, it is a classic combination by the book yellow and orange yellow and deep blue. We all know that it is complementary colors. That's why complementary and primary. So we know why it works. Not only because John Sargent has chosen them, but because it must work, and it does. All right, this one. This is another motif. That's why I thought it would be interesting for us to look at. Just the little part, little fragment of natural world. See, little one, but so many interesting depiction and so many interesting details being picked up by the very light brush of the artist. Not that he was sitting at it for 10 hours trying to copy all the details of the thing that he's looking at. No, the right touch of the brush in the right side of his picture delivers this message. This is another mountain in the sky and the hilltop with the rocks. And I want us to see that one. Yeah, that is fascinating. Look at it. Take your time and look at this picture. Oh, there is my pointer. Look at this picture. Can you physically feel the fog that falling slowly, moving slowly, crawling down the hill of those mountains? And the huge mountain itself can be seen in the corner of the picture, but very soon everything will be covered by that mist. And what a painting it is. All right, let's look at the trees. Let's look at those things. I am sure that nothing but joy those paintings can bring to us. And that is a reference to our own experiences when we paint plein air, right? I just want to bring your attention to that very simple picture. The crowns of the trees, then the sky that changes its color from the blue to the little bit pinkish color, of course, because it was in nature at the moment when the painting was created. But believe me, it is enhanced a little bit because that allows to underscore, to enhance the boldness of the grounds and the green of the grass. Well, I am sure that artist does not think about it when artist paints. Artist just paints, and it comes from his hand and from his heart by what we call intuition. And what is intuition? A lot of practice, a lot of experience, and the talent. The combination that we already talked about. Another very interesting painting, by the way, and another example of how artist John Sargent incorporates human figure into the landscape. Uh, Another one is a very special one. It is very tender, and it shows the figures of the ladies sitting at the foot of the tree in the shade, because by their outfit, we can imagine that probably it was summertime, something like that. It is known that John Sargent loved to come in the spring or summertime to New England to paint here. Maybe it is done at some point there. One more example of that, as I call summertime painting. The sun, the light is coming through the umbrella. It falls onto the white dress of the ladies, and her face is in the shadow of her hat. Altogether, it gives us the pleasure of painting, as well as that laying, resting figure. And let's see what we have here. Another a lady traveling under her umbrella. In those times, ladies of the society, they would go out with umbrellas, shading themselves from the sun. This one, another one of my favorite paintings. Not only it presents a perfect composition, and it is a perfect composition, not only because it is central composition, which is always perfect, as we all know, but also because it shows a lot of intelligence in that painting. White dress and dark dress, lights and shadows on the white wall, slightly bluish the frame of the door, and the endless perspective, the depth of the space. You just want to get up the stairs and go there and go there and allow yourself get lost in the depth of that very friendly space, and then get back and to chat with these two ladies, right? Few more watercolors. Those guitar players, I'm sure that those etudes with guitar players, with Arabian ladies carrying waters on their hands, and with those figures, they were created while John Sargent was traveling around the world in his younger years and in his later years. We are going to touch that subject a little bit later, because he was traveling not only for pleasure of traveling, but having in mind very complex projects commissioned to him. We'll get to it. We'll get to it a little bit later. Yeah. Well, that is just an example of mastership, and I wanted to share it to you, with you. So little, seemingly little of labor and such a perfect result, right? Let us move. I wanted to include that particular painting in our exposition, put it in our display. First, because it is watercolor. Secondly, because it is from the collection of Museum of Fine Arts, which has a lot of John Sargent's paintings, oils, watercolors, letters, completing the archive of John Sargent, and many other things. And also, I wanted to show you that painting. Not only that artist could go for cities, or for waters, or for people, or for society clientele, but also look at these dogs. Look at them. Aren't they very cute and serious? They're hunting dogs. Also, I wanted us to look at this painting. Again, what I am fascinated when I'm looking at this painting, the lightness of the brush. The lightness of the brush, the full, complete command of the hand and the mind, and the perfect quality of drawing, right? Of course, right. All right, let's see what we've got here. I have here several examples of not watercolors, but of drawings. Another, I repeat that piece because it is now presenting not only the self-portrait, but the quality of drawing. And that charcoal portrait, and that one, and this etude as well. And this a very simple drawing. This one has a special meaning, and I just wanted to point at it because this is the etude of the model Thomas McKinley, and he is known as one of John Sargent's favorite models. It is said that John Sargent was using that particular model for many of his compositions, multi-figured compositions that we still are going to look at. Now I just want to jump back a little bit because I want to ask you one question. It is perfect art, right? It is what we called when we looked at oils and when we look at watercolors. We call it mastership, perfect painting. Now, what makes art art? What brings perfect painting into a piece of art? I think that John Sargent watercolors are allowing us to see it very clear, as well as it can be seen in his portraits, and we are going to get back to it as well. What is here? One more jump, just to remind you. What is here is, it is not a quotation, it is my freehand retelling, so to speak, of the thought of the great thinker of the 15th century, Nikolaus Kouzanos, who wrote something in my very free retelling. When great good, when real good intensifies within itself, really intensifies within itself, and warms within itself. The good gives away the light to the outside world. And the light that great good grants to all of us is the light of beauty. It is how it realizes itself through the beauty, through the beauty. And the beauty realizes itself, gets embodied into many things. And we are looking at art as the one of the embodiments of beauty, which carries out that depth of good and goodness that comes to us as a message. So when artist is painting something sincerely, and when the artist, while art making, really loves the world that he or she is creating, and when this artist possesses the high quality of the mastership, that combination brings to us the message of love, which is really good for us, nourishes our souls and our intellect, allows us to appreciate fully what is around us. And what is around us is beauty that shows us the goodness of the world that we live in. All right, let's go further, because we have a lot of things yet to enjoy. Yeah. So when we enjoy portraiture and watercolors of John Sargent, we of course hope and think that the artist could appreciate his own achievement. And it was not exactly that, because John Sargent believed that seriously only historic art can be taken. All other things is just not that serious. So he wanted to do that. Historic paintings, murals, etc., etc. Being a really very prolific artist, and with all his great accomplishments, which, by the way, brought him in 1897 full membership in the Royal Academy, Great Britain, of course. He, of course, built and created a very, very comfortable financial cushion for himself. So he could allow himself whatever he would want. He could have commissions for whatever he was hoped to have. And one of the commissions came to him in 1890, relatively early. It was the commission from Boston Public Library. And he worked on that commission for 25 years, on and off, getting back to it, traveling around the world, especially into the Mediterranean European countries, just to research the fresco paintings over there, because what he wanted to accomplish for this commissioned painting, he wanted to accomplish the synoptic presentation of the general religious thought of the world. So he traveled. He traveled and he painted and he painted. And then in 1916 and 1922, he was commissioned to create a decoration for MFA, for Rotonda and Colonnade. Let me move myself out of the way so we can see those photographs presenting this kind of work. And those who remember their experiences at MFA could remember those as well. They're cartouches, ovals, and round thing presenting the works that on mythology and other subjects that John Sargent created for MFA. Let's see what else there. Yeah. This one, phaeton falling down, center, another picture of that kind. What I want us to appreciate very much, I want us to appreciate very much the mastery of drawing, of building the space, of mastering the space, because in relatively small space, we can see so many things happening, and not only these things are happening, they are presented in the three-dimensional space on the two-dimensional surface, almost to the feeling of the sculptural presentation. And it is a good painting as well, of course. Again, look at it. All color combinations, all that we call renderings. One more mural is owned by Isabella Gardner Museum. Let me move myself from the way again. Here. Apollo and his chariot. Great presentation. I am sure that for that particular presentation, multi-figured, look how human figured are presented, just as close as it possibly be to the state of perfection, right? Right. What I have to say, before we move to the other example, completely other example of the John Sargent work, I want to mention that it is known that those patrons, those who commissioned those works, were very happy with the outcome of that work. Posterity was not very pleased. They were in the sometime in the middle of 20th century. It was coined, even the phrase that I picked up from one of the sources, of seductive way of John Sargent approach. It was changed. The appreciation came back in some form, but however, it was how John Sargent was seen in the beginning, in the first third, or in the first half of 20th century. Why I'm circling that image? When I found it in my research, I was attracted not only because it is giving us a chance to see the detail, the part of that big fresco, because it allows us to see more details. I was not attracted, but I thought that it was very telling. The name, the title of that image, it was named in the source that I pulled it from. It was named Giant Lollipops. Giant Lollipops. It is how it was thought in the times that I mentioned. It is said, though, that the reputation of John Sargent was bettered starting from 1964, starting from the exhibitions run in the United States in London. But before that, that was Giant Lollipops. Well, it is how posterity judges us. Now let's get back to the time of John Sargent, because we have one more page. In 1918, John Sargent accepted the title of war artist. It was the First World War. And yes, he created a lot of sketches at front. He was there. He was there sketching the wounded soldiers. And in he was working on the piece called Gassed. It is a huge painting, length more than 7 yards or something more than that, close to 8 yards, which presented that huge painting, presents the image about, it's called Gassed, presented the outcome of the mustard gas attack at the front of World War I. And artist presents the soldiers moving slowly to the dressing station. And some of them, as you can see, cannot even move anymore. So this is the huge painting. It is now owned by International War Museum in London. Not only I wanted us to look at this painting because the rendering of the figures is more than excellent. The presentation is very sympathetic. You can see the detail, the fragment of that I've chosen to show you. I wanted you to see how it presents itself in the museum over there. See, the viewer is looking at it. And here, restorers are taking care of the painting, so it keeps its existence safely, because, you know, the atmosphere, the dry of the air, the humidity, everything affects the oil painting, so it has to be protected. And I want us to take a good look at those drawings. It shows us another side of John Sargent, not only as an artist who already knew that he could draw and paint everything that he wanted. However, he took his time, he took his pencil, and he created a plenitude of sketches. He researched details, how the head holds the bandage, how the wounded person holds the head, how the hands are hung when people are just moving somewhere, like in these paintings. And we can find all these finds that is picked up through the renderings, through the etudes and sketches in this huge painting. So let us jump back to the beginning of our presentation. It will take a few jumps because I want to show you something in the very beginning. I think that, did I? Yeah, I overjumped it. Yeah, no. Aha, I found it. Not yet to Madame Gautreau. I want us to look at this painting. This one. Interesting that this painting is presented here in this frame, together with the photograph of the model. It is a commission, of course. It is clearly the commission. Now, looking at this image of the painting and looking at the photograph of the person who commissioned that painting, you understand why through all his life, John Singer Sargent could not possibly escape the demand of portraying. And why? Can you imagine that somebody who could allow himself to be presented to posterity in such a beautiful way would escape the possibility of using it? So commissions were pouring onto John Singer Sargent. Not only because it is a beautiful painting, which it is. Again, this is another example of my favorite topic of today's conversation, as I understand. Painting of white. White and skin is painted so beautifully. And the lady is presented with such a nobility. She has the air of nobility, the glamorous state of her persona, the style of it, high style, without any deception. John Sargent does not deceive you, does not deceive the person who commissioned him the portrait. They are the same features, absolutely the same features, without any change, without any beautifying. The magic here is that he could see the real person, the real beauty in the person who was sitting before him as a model, as a sitter. Here, I wanted to say that if Photoshop could try to compete with John Sargent in beautifying the person, the image of the person, Photoshop would have to admit that John Singer Sargent wins big time, right? So let us get back to that portrait. I promised you that when we finish our presentation, I will get back to that picture, because the story behind it, a very, to me, is very touching story. Look again at this portrait. Look again at the perfect positioning of the figure. and very difficult one. The shoulder is moving up to us. The arm is getting much deeper into the space of the room and into the space of the picture. Another hand with very complex gesture is holding the silk, and the silk is black. And to paint black, you trust me, is much more difficult than white. That is for sure. And the background and everything. And after all, look how skin of that décolleté and the face and the hands, how the skin is shining, is shining. This is the painting. This is the real painting. So the end of the story of that painting is this. After 30 years of keeping it in his studio, John Sargent decided to sell it to Metropolitan Museum of Art. With it I think it has happened in 1914. Madame Gautreau was still alive. He lived one more year. And John Sargent asked Metropolitan to disguise her name. So how do we know this painting? Under what title we know that painting? Madame X. We know that painting under the title Madame X. John Sargent mentioned while selling it to the Metropolitan, he said that he thought that it was the best thing that he has done. Isn't it impressive? And sometimes I think that it is not far from the truth. It might be, very possibly, very possibly. Thank you for listening about John Sargent. Before I part with you, I want to offer you another metaphor by the end of our talk, of our meeting. When we entering the garden of art, because I feel that we can call the art, we can see the art as the garden where in a perfect world we all live. And we roam around and suddenly we see the beautiful tree. The beautiful, beautiful, beautiful tree, and we love it, and we go to it, and we touch it, and we hug it, and we look at the mighty branches of that tree holding its leaves and flowers and fruits and proffering those fruits to us so we can enjoy it and we can sustain the life of our souls and minds and hearts with the fruit of that tree. The tree of art, in our case, the tree of art by John Singer Sargent. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you do enjoy this artwork.